Okay, welcome back to Midweek Mind Check. And in the studio right now is Nikita Giridhar, who is part of Off Your Shoulders. That's her own organization, actually. Welcome back, Nikki. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Lee. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. And, this morning, before we start off this topic, which is alcohol and emotions, I think a very important topic that we all really know a little bit about, but not too much about, and hoping to get some more clarity on this. I want to tell you a story before I start this, why I caught this topic in mind. A friend of mine, actually, a couple of weeks ago, he fell into a pond. All right. Yeah, he was quite drunk and he fell into a pond and he called me to pick him up after this and he booked the cab to the wrong place after that also. So he's called me from this metro station and he's like, can you please pick me up? And I picked him up and I realized, and he was drenched. And I was like, bro, why are you drenched like this? What happened? And he could not tell me at all. Luckily, the next day I found the entire story out. But basically, he did a couple of shots which he wasn't supposed to do early, and then one thing led to the other, and he fell and tipped into the pond. He left immediately, booked to the wrong place, and the rest is history.
Oh my.
Yeah, so I thought of this. I thought, you know what, let's talk about this topic a little bit more and find out more about why alcohol makes us do things, as well as get to know more about what happens to our emotions when this happens to us, right? So, Nikki, the first question is, alcohol is a depressant, but why does it make us feel good, right? And what is that, when you say depressant, what does it mean exactly?
I actually love that question because it is so confusing, right? Like we say alcohol is a depressant, but we drink and we feel super excited, happy, relaxed, right? So when we say alcohol is a depressant, we are saying that it is depressing or suppressing the central nervous system and it is slowing down brain activity, right? It's not really depressing you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's say I'm like super stressed at work. My central nervous system is carrying stress, right?
Yeah.
When I drink alcohol, that gets suppressed. So I feel more relaxed. I feel super easygoing. At the same time, what's happening is that your brain activity is slowing down. So your inhibition is also lower, right? So when inhibition is lower, if you have a motivation to act on something, let's say calling a friend or an ex, you tend to act on it, right? You act on it, your dopamine fires even more, right? So anyways, when you drink alcohol, a lot of dopamine is released, serotonin is released, so it makes you feel good. But at the same time, because it is suppressing stress and it is suppressing any like arousal in your nervous system, you feel relaxed, right? So it's a very
So that's
complex.
why it's depressing, they say. It's a depressant.
Absolutely. It's depressing the nervous system, not really your emotions.
Yeah. Right. Okay, that's the clarification for sure. One thing you mentioned is calling your ex. Why do we feel the need to call our exes when we are drunk? That happens quite often at times. You just feel like going back to that one toxic person that you're in your life and you realize, okay, but it's happening when you're drunk.
Yeah.
The next morning, you're just like, why did I do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is particularly usually, it could be a toxic ex. It need not be a toxic ex.
That's also true, yeah.
Any ex, right? I think obviously the biological reasons are that your inhibition is lowered and dopamine is really high, confidence is high. So you're like, whatever motivation I have here, it's going to play out exactly how I want it to, right? There's a lot of confidence in the outcome.
They call it liquid confidence for a reason, right? That's
Absolutely.
the whole idea. Yeah, liquid confidence. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think another like psychosocial reason why we call our ex is because this is modeled in pop culture a lot, right? Like when you're broken up, heartbroken, you get drunk and you call your ex. It is also a way to like come off as very helpless so that your ex can reach out to you. They know that you're in pain if you're drunk, somewhere lost, right? So we know these things unconsciously and we engage with them when we are drunk. And I think it's kind of like unconsciously you're thinking that if calling my ex doesn't go my way, I can always just blame it on alcohol the next day.
Yeah.
It's a very easy way to like initiate something, and if you get rejected, you have an excuse.
I was really drunk. I'm so sorry. Yeah, exactly. You can just play off of that, right?
Absolutely. It's unconscious. I don't think people do that consciously, but it's very unconscious.
Right. Now, people get emotional when they drink alcohol, right? So why does that happen? Why do we get so emotional when we drink alcohol?
Right. So in general, I think psychosocially again, we might begin to realize that, okay, at other times when I'm sober, it's not socially acceptable for me to cry or like become very, very emotional around my friends. But when I get drunk, I can give myself permission to cry, right? So that association can build because we also see it like in movies. Maybe I can't cry, especially for men, because they're not really socialized to cry. Maybe I can't cry when I'm sober, but I can when I'm drunk. Right?
Yeah.
That's one. Obviously, there's biological reasons. Your inhibition is lower, so you don't really think of the consequences of showing your emotions that you might when you're sober. Besides that, I also think that, for those of us who chronically become emotional when we're drunk, it's almost as if the brain has built a very strong association with getting drunk and becoming
Feeling
emotional.
Right.
So you do it once, you do it twice, and then it becomes a habit.
And the next day, that's the other explanation I want. The next day you feel shame, regret, at times the things you've done. My friend, when he fell in the pond, he was so embarrassed about what happened. But not necessarily to be embarrassed about it. It's a funny incident in our lives, in our perspective, but he feels a lot of shame about it. He felt a lot of shame about it. So
Absolutely.
what about that? How does that come into play?
So I like to call that, actually, most people really accept this term as well, hangxiety, right?
Hangxiety. I like that a
hangover,
lot.
anxiety, and depression. And obviously, there's biological factors at play here. You've not slept well. Your brain activity was really on crack the previous day, and suddenly, it's come down. And
Right.
essentially, what has happened if you've consumed in excess is that your brain is in a state of withdrawal, right? So you're actually still craving alcohol, and so you're not in a very emotionally happy place, right? Because you don't have something and you're craving it. Besides that, I think biologically you're also dehydrated, and if you know that when you're dehydrated, your hands will shake a little bit, and so the body feels that as anxiety again, right? So these are the biological reasons overall. But again, psychosocially, I think when you lose memory, for those of us with a poor relationship with control, this can be very uncomfortable, right? Like, you don't know what you said, what you did, how you were perceived.
It's a different person altogether.
Yeah, you
It's
can't recognize
scary.
yourself.
Yeah.
Very, very scary. And of course, there's always social consequences to our behavior.
Yeah.
And when we're not in touch with what we did the previous night, it can just really flood our bodies with shame, guilt, anxiety. And if you know, if your friend told you, hey, you did this, and you only have a part of the story, oh man, that's even more anxiety from there.
Right.
Yeah.
And the hangover is just the worst part of the entire thing. That's the prize at the end of the bottle, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I also think that for those of us who are constantly trying to have a better relationship with alcohol, when we end up too drunk and when we get hungover, it's like the two parts of us are in conflict. Like, they're like shouting at each other. They're saying, like, I was not supposed to drink that much. Why did I drink that much?
Correct.
And the other part is like, I just wanted to relax and let
Exactly.
go. And so you have that internal conflict as well.
Exactly. Now, sometimes we do, as you mentioned, go overboard a little bit more because, okay, yes, having a drink or two once in a while is at a social function not a bad thing at all. It helps you, as you mentioned, lose your inhibitions, you have fun, you enjoy yourself. But how do you also know when to stop? Like, how do you stop yourself or hack your brain from telling you, okay, I think you should stop now? How do you do that?
Yeah.
Is that even possible? I hope it is.
It's definitely possible.
Right.
But I do think it takes, firstly, ask yourself, why do I want to control my drinking? Is this because everyone says you shouldn't drink a lot? Because if that's why you want to stop drinking, you're not really connected with the outcome of reducing your alcohol consumption, right? So let's say I ask myself, I want to stop drinking or I want to control my drinking because I care about my health. I'll then ask myself, why do I care about my health? Maybe my answer is I want to live a long time. Why do I want to live a long time, right? These questions are really important because in order to change our behavior, you need to be connected with the outcome. Right? So it can't just be because my dad said stop drinking. You won't stop drinking.
Exactly.
Right? Another way is definitely, and I might get a lot of flack for this, but your friend might agree with me, is to control the consumption of shots. Right?
Yes, I think that's the main goal here. Yes.
The thing with shots is that you drink one round of shots, another round of shots, and then your decision-making abilities plummet, right? And by then, you're not really able to decipher between how much you decided you should drink and how much your friends are telling you to drink. And so you're not really able to make those decisions in your favor anymore. Right? So I would say either don't do shots whatsoever or leave one round for the end, maybe just for a celebratory, round. Other than that, I think, especially if you're a little older, I think it's also helpful to have a conversation with your social circle, right? I mean, of course, there's a chance that they'll blow you off.
Right.
But if they do understand, and I'm sure some might even agree with you, it's really worth a shot, pun intended. I think that, how your social circle behaves can really influence how you behave.
Right.
And if you can find some common ground there, all of you can change your behavior.
Maybe just calling somebody on like, hey, last drink,
Yeah.
don't go more
But I
than
would
this.
say have this conversation when you're sober.
Right, don't do it when you're drunk,
Yeah,
right?
not when you're drunk, because it's not going to be helpful. Everyone wants to drink more when they're drunk.
Yeah.
But have this conversation when you're sober. Find like the most, trustworthy friend and allow them to support you in the conversation. I mean, it may not work really, but it's really, really, worth a try. One last part of this would be to set an intention each time you go out, right?
Okay.
We think that having the belief that we should control drinking is enough to control our drinking. But we need to kind of talk to ourselves before we go out to set that intention, right? So let's say I'm in a cab going out, I can just take a moment to close my eyes and no one's going to notice. I'm going to take a second to close my eyes, talk to myself and say, okay, 3 drinks tonight, right? Of course, it may not always be in alignment, but it does kind of control your behavior through the night.
Right. And I think one thing most people don't do at times, like when they go overboard, is not pacing yourself. Like I think it's fine to drink, but if you don't pace yourself and you get really drunk in the first hour itself, then things can go haywire.
Yeah. A great way is also to like alternate between a glass of water and
hydration. Definitely,
Absolutely.
right? Now, in no way am I supporting like people go drink or whatever. I'm saying we do encounter situations where we do drink. So when you're in the situation, please be careful. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Next question would be definitely alcohol addiction, which is a huge issue in India, across the entire world as well. There are support groups that help you deal with alcohol addiction as well, right? So if somebody is addicted to alcohol, what do? They keep craving alcohol. What is the next step?
Yeah. I think if there's any listeners that kind of align with this, I would
and viewers as well, please. Yeah,
absolutely. I would say realize that addiction is not a moral failing. Firstly, it is a disorder, right? It's a mental and physical disorder.
I think the common ground is that it's your choice. You don't have the willpower to say no.
Yeah.
That should change, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely, right? And a lot of times we look at alcoholism as a shameful thing. And I understand that because, it produces a lot of bad social outcomes. But if I could talk directly to someone suffering with this, I would say it's really not a moral failure. Like you're not a bad person because you're an alcoholic. I think you're just suffering, and there's access to so much today, right? We have psychiatrists who prescribe medication that can help you get de-addicted. We have psychologists. I'm a psychologist. We work with clients to, stop the connection between having a craving and then accessing alcohol. And there's government facilities, there's private, very luxurious private facilities as well, where they not only focus on your biology, your health, but they focus on your emotional well-being, your family's emotional well-being, right? There's access to lots. You just have to reach out.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that family members also get affected with alcoholism. That's one of the biggest things out there.
Very true.
It's not just the person who's going through the alcoholism, but as you mentioned, the social factors that surround it as well. So are there any tools for them to access it as well? Like who do they get in touch with?
I think that many times when there is someone suffering with alcoholism in the family, it does fall on the family members to access resources because they are no longer, the person suffering is no longer in a place of deciding for themselves. And so that can feel very, very heavy for a family member. But I would say even if it means that people from the facility are coming and taking a family member away, it's going to be heart-wrenching to see that.
Yeah.
But in the long run, you will be very thankful. Right. So feel free to take those cold, harsher decisions as well.
Last question, I'm going off script a little bit. As you mentioned, family members, right? I've always noticed that it's also the person who's addicted has to take the decision to get help, right? Because you can't force that decision onto them, right?
Yeah.
So how do you suppose stage an intervention? Do you have any idea on that? Can you talk about that a little bit?
So I can talk about that in a way that sometimes I know that there are facilities that walk in and when the person is asleep, they take them. Right.
Okay.
I don't think that you always need consent, especially when they are not in the right mind, right? They're not conscious. If the family gives consent, is usually enough. You don't really need them to come and say, hey, okay, I'm ready to get help.
Right.
Which is why I was saying, like, as family, feel free to take those colder calls for the greater good for yourself, ultimately. Even forget, like, the other person. Like, it's too stressful for you to constantly be around somebody who is not aware of their behavior.
All right. Thank you once again, Nikki, for telling us more about, alcohol and the emotions that come with it, as well as the different stages of, shots, basically, right? Go down your throat. But really, eye-opening talk this morning. And I want to thank you once again for coming down
Thank you.
and talking to us. Nikki, how do we get in touch with you if you want to get in, like, suppose a client wants to get in touch with you? How do I do that?
So you can reach out to me. There's a link in my Instagram bio. My Instagram handle is off.your shoulders.
Off.your-shoulders.
Yeah.
Okay, off.your-shoulders on Instagram. Reach out to her, and if you need any help, she's there for you.
Absolutely.
Thank
Drink
you.
safely.
Drink safely and responsibly. And thank you once again, Nikki. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you so much. You too.